Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our February 27, 2018 meeting of the Teaching and Learning Committee. Again, we apologize for starting a little late, but we have a pretty packed agenda this morning. We're going to be reviewing some curriculum approval around math and fine arts. We'll be looking at getting a pipeline update around work around teacher and school leaders. A deep dive into the kindergarten readiness assessment results, an update for special education services for second quarter, and procurement. So we are not going to waste any more time, and let's get started with the curriculum approval. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Janice Lane, Executive Director of Teaching and Learning.
Good morning, Chanel Howard, Fine Arts Coordinator. Good morning, is that better? Chanel Howard.
That's it.
Good morning, Chanel Howard, Fine Arts Coordinator.
Good morning, Beth Sappy, Director of Mathematics.
As you framed, we're going to be talking to you this morning about the curriculum approval. If you look, this is built around the cycle that we've worked through with you all before, really looking at how it comes in a cyclical process. So due this spring is both mathematics and fine arts. And if you remember, mathematics was approved by the board in 2014. Fine arts was reviewed but was not approved in July of 2015. So we'll talk about that in the next couple of slides. Here you see the approval cycle. You remember that it is based on a 5-year cycle of rotation. So you'll see again that spring brings to us both math and the fine arts. And really what that means is that you'll be looking at the grade level scope and sequence, the executive summary that will be shared with you and made public so that you'll have a chance to review that and then give us recommendations and approval or next steps. So we're going to start with Beth. She's going to share the mathematics plan.
Good morning. So starting with math, Eureka Curriculum was implemented in schools beginning September 2017 for students in grades pre-K through pre-calculus. Eureka Math is fully aligned to the Maryland College and Career Readiness Standards, and this shifts for mathematics. Eureka was also reviewed by the edreports.org, which also confirms this alignment. The curriculum has a clear progression throughout all math courses, which I will describe in more detail when we get to that next slide. Eureka Math includes a variety of resources to support teachers in their teaching and learning. Eureka resources provide a teacher-friendly platform, including professional development videos to support teacher planning. There's a video series containing an explanation of math concepts and instructional strategies for each lesson. And there's also a digital navigator, which is a clickable version of the curriculum, which includes additional professional learning videos, trajectory of topics, and includes strategies to differentiate instruction, which is very helpful for teachers. Eureka also includes parent tip sheets for grades pre-K through 8. These tip sheets include suggested strategies and models, key vocabulary, connections to previous learning, and tips for how parents can support their child's learning at home. And they are arranged in the same sequence as the scope and sequence and the student homework that make it easy for parents to follow along with their child's progress. The Math Office also created a curriculum site that includes curriculum documents, curriculum and assessment resources, along with professional development sessions. Our office created a detailed daily, short-term, and long-term pacing document for teachers to use as a planning tool. We've also created the acceleration guides that I know we spoke about before to support each course. These acceleration guides include the resources aligned to each module. These documents provide the enrichment activities to deepen students' understanding of the focus standards and address the gaps in learning for the foundational standards aligned to the content in the next module of study. Lastly, starting this year, we are also implementing Achievement Network formative interim assessments aligned to the Eureka curriculum in grades 1 through Algebra 2. The ANET interim assessments provide immediate formative data for teachers so they can make strategic adjustments to advance their students' learning. In addition to the interim assessments, we also have ANET coaches supporting teachers and leaders in advancing the school's math instructional priorities at 20 sites. I know you've seen this document or this slide before, but I just want to restate around that clear progression from pre-K to pre-calculus with the Eureka Curriculum. It was designed around the Common Core progressions and the shifts in mathematics, which are focus, coherence, and rigor. The curriculum progression from pre-K to pre-calculus helps students see those connections within grades and across grades. The models and strategies within each of these courses build to help students develop a deep understanding of the math in a coherent way. The models and strategies students are using in elementary school will continue as they spiral through middle and high school. So when students start understanding these strategies and working with them and the concrete examples in elementary, they build on that as they are in middle school and high school. The Instructional Core, which is nothing new to any of us, we're maintaining that around the same focus as we continue grounding our work in the content as it's aligned to the Instructional Core, and as we're thinking about what leaders and teachers and the students need. We are deepening stakeholder content knowledge while unpacking the Eureka Curriculum through the lens of the shifts and the math teaching practices, while building that leadership capacity around the structures needed to effectively implement and work on student achievement. We have shared this in the past, the coherency model and what professional learning looks like for central office employees all the way through our school-based staff. We are targeting learning for all stakeholders around academic discourse and how to elicit and use evidence of student thinking to give feedback and to make instructional decisions through the lens of the teacher and student actions aligned to the research from the National Council of Teacher Mathematics Principles to Action book. We are making deliberate moves based on data, specifically around ANET and PARC this year, to deepen content knowledge based on the data analysis to focus on specific grade level domains and clusters of content during our professional learning opportunities. Some of the opportunities that we are working with stakeholders this year are around the weekly academic content liaison inputs for supports to schools. So we focus on collaborative planning, data analysis, math content, and coaching, and much more during our ACL meetings. We also have a weekly collective learning at central office for all ILEDs, the executive leadership education directors. I'm trying to say, not use the acronyms. The ACLs again, which are the academic content liaison, and the SELs is the special education liaisons each week, and the math office to engage in the content together and determine best practices to support the school needs. We also have monthly CLN, the Community Learning Network sessions, for principals and math representatives at each school. We do this once a month in different schools across each CLN to facilitate meaningful math discourse and elicit and use evidence of student thinking is our focus this year. During these sessions, we also spend time analyzing school-level data and teacher data, along with the student work to determine mastery of standards and identify next instructional steps using a 4-step decision process. We model effective leadership strategies and structures to implement the mathematics cycle of professional learning, and also keep that aligned to the literacy cycle also. Focusing in on those learning walks, peer observations, planning, reflecting, and making adjustments. Each month, we also work with our math representatives. There's one person designated from each school to support their coaching, their planning, and providing feedback to their grade level teachers. And we also go deeper into those teaching practices and into the content. Lastly is around the teachers and the systemic professional learning and other opportunities that I will share with you on this slide. This year, we've been designing teacher systemic professional development to be differentiated, giving teachers opportunities to choose from a variety of sessions to meet their learning needs. These include sessions for planning and practice with grade level curriculum by unpacking standards while building content knowledge. So really focusing in on that content and what it looks like in the curriculum and how are we supporting them to have a deeper understanding of the content while also giving them strategies around the pedagogy. We're also unpacking and leveraging interim data to differentiate instruction using that 4-step decision process, along with sessions to deepen teachers' understandings around the math teaching practices and how to effectively implement them into their teaching and learning aligned to the Eureka Curriculum. Lastly, we are also successfully implementing a teacher professional learning community that teachers are leading and supporting with a focus on planning and preparation for upcoming teaching in all grade levels. And at this time, we're in the 2nd session of that, and we will also have a 3rd session for teachers this school year. And as we want to make sure we are giving all stakeholders what they need to advance the learning, we are also offering feedback sessions. We had one in January, and we also are doing online surveys across so the teachers can give us feedback on our curriculum and the professional development and assessments that we have. I'm now going to pass the mic over to Chanel to talk about some fine arts.
If you don't mind, we're going to ask questions around math, and
Sure.
then we'll go to fine arts.
Okay, sure.
So can I begin? Thank you for that presentation. I really appreciate it. And I think it's really important for us as a committee and as a system say, yes, as part of the blueprint, literacy is a focus, but it doesn't mean we're ignoring math. Like the move that you all have done with math and the adoption or proposed adoption of Eureka, as well as the ANET assessments, formative and summative, I think is a big statement, and it's going to move us in the right direction, and I'm really pleased with it. What evidence that we have that Eureka is effective? Eureka has been adopted in lots of places. This is something I'm going to want to review prior to adoption. Like where has it been used, and how do we know it's been effective? What data and evidence that have we used to guide this decision?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can respond now, or you can just I know we have an adoption process. You can maybe give a high level, and then I have a second question.
Right. I mean, we can definitely share with you the data and reasons why we decided to choose Eureka. In another, we shared with that at the board meeting last year, and I can
Yeah.
definitely make sure you guys get that, so you can read through.
Yeah, I think that's going to be important because the official vote for this is, I know it's later in the presentation, is end of April. Is that right? So I think board members are just going to want to be reminded about the effectiveness of Eureka. The second one is I am continued to be, we all know the data that suggests that if a gateway indicator is if we can have our students ready for Algebra 1 by 8th grade. And yet, I am concerned or worried that how many students how many places have the classes been offered across the system. I think every school should be offering Algebra 1. How many students are enrolled in that classes, and then how many students are actually getting through Algebra 1. And to me, I guess I want to hear, number one is that the goal? And then if so, I would like to understand our state, what our current state is right now. Which middle schools has Algebra 1, which does not offer Algebra 1? How many students are sitting in an Algebra 1 class by 8th grade? And then what I want to know is what our goals are to improve that. Because I think we've talked about that, but I don't know the numbers. And I think Eureka and these assessments will help us go in the right direction, but I actually want to make sure we're making progress. So that's my second line of questioning.
And we can definitely prepare an update around that, because I know the team has been doing some reviewing around, as well as Eureka offers a compacted curriculum to get students ready for that. We should make a decision, because I know it's been a topic of discussion, whether we want to have a separate conversation about it or whether you want a written update around that.
Yeah, to me, it's just I'd like to understand, I feel like we have the components in place. So to me, I defer to the chair whether she wants a separate conversation on that. I'm okay with a written update on, I just want us to be able to say, here's our current state, and being honest about it.
Sure.
We're not there. We're not where we need to be. But at the end of the day, we want more of our kids to take Algebra by 8th grade, and we're going to track that, and you're going to report that back to the Teaching and Learning Committee. That's something I'm interested in.
And I do appreciate that question, because that is something that we're really working on. And I know we've talked a little bit before around the engineers of the future, where we're doing the virtual algebra in grade 8, along with really right now I've been focusing on looking at all the PARCC scores and identifying schools that we really need to push to do that compacted math in grade 6 to build their capacity, if the schools have the capacity and the structures in place to do so. And then how do we build out more opportunities for these students so that they are ready in grade 8? Because we don't want to give Algebra 1 to a student that's not ready in grade 8, but how do we work with them building that capacity on their content so that they are ready by the time they're in grade 8?
Yeah, I think there's something, so I agree with that, because what would it do, but I don't want it to be an excuse to say kids aren't ready, so we're not going to offer it to them, you know? Because what happens is, it's the same thing with our AP and our AP offerings. When I push on this, we don't offer APs because our kids aren't ready, we don't train our teachers, the teachers aren't trained, and so we don't offer it. At the end of the day, if we put a line in the sand and say, it's our expectation that that's where we want our students and we expect of our students, then we can back map it and see where we're going and what we need to do. But I guess, so I agree with the compacted curriculum, but I also agree that we should actually have that as an expectation and think about how we get our kids there.
Yeah, and it sounds like those are going to converge at a point, because the adoption of the curriculum is to get us to the point that you want, and then I think your strategy is how can we go from where we are now to reach there. So
That's right.
I think if we could do the written report and just include that in updates that come to the committee,
Sure.
that would be helpful.
Okay,
No
great.
problem.
Anyone else have a math question before I ask my math question? Mine's very easy. No? Okay. My main question is around, I'm living through some of this with some grandkids, so what in terms of the additional support is happening for parents and I hear lots of folks talk about, get lots of phone calls in the evening, what is this all, how do we do this, and it's so different, and so what kind of things are you doing specifically to help schools then to reach out to parents and community around understanding this?
So the first thing that we have are the parent tip sheets that go along with every module on topic in grades pre-K through 8 that help parents understand the strategies and models that students are using, so that when they're supporting their students at home, their children at home, they can help them with that. That is something we've been talking about a lot, of how do we really engage the parents more deeply. Every school sort of does that a little bit differently, and how do we make that sort of streamlined so that everybody's doing the same thing and giving their parents the same supports. We are offering, we'll talk about it at the end, but having a engagement session for parents and community members on March 14th around math and fine arts, and we're really going to do some of the math with parents and students so they can work together and do some of the activities in the math that they would be doing in class.
And then I'm assuming that the teachers, the reps that are in the building, that's a part of a role that they may also be playing in terms of helping to coordinate that kind of support for parents. Okay. Yes.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
What PD do we plan to provide for the content liaisons as we are planning to roll this out to schools, individual schools?
The academic content liaisons?
Yes.
They are in the schools almost every single day, working side by side with the teachers and the math reps. So we meet with them weekly around content and coaching that's aligned to Eureka Curriculum. And this year we had a big focus also on the Achievement Network and doing PD with them first around like the discourse and what that looks like in the curriculum, and really unpacking that content and how does that play out in a classroom, what does that look like, different strategies, and then also moving into, now we're looking at elicit and use evidence of student thinking. So how are we supporting our schools around that so that they can help their teachers, so that the teachers are better at it, so that we are actually seeing the student achievement behind that, and what does that look like in a classroom. So when we meet with the ACLs on Wednesdays, we also meet with them and their ILEDs again on Fridays to build that content knowledge so that when they're working with schools that they have the structures in place.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
For our most current revision of fine arts curriculum, we focused this term on music and visual art. And so what we did, myself and a team of teacher leaders, is that we developed new general music and high school performing groups curricula. And that curriculum is aligned with NAFME standards for music and also Maryland Fine Arts standards as well. That curriculum does provide a scope and sequence for teachers, as well as rolls out into 4 units over the course of a school year. Those units are standards-based. Within the curriculum, sample lessons are provided, as well as sample assessments. These are prescriptive for new educators, but should be used as a reference point for seasoned veteran teachers. The curriculum is student-centered. We're very proud of that. And it makes efficient use of Baltimore resources and arts venues as curricular ties to the community. And also, I've been using a bit of our fine arts grant to leverage for resources to help teachers to be able to bring forward the goals that are within the curriculum. For visual art, we also developed for pre-K through 12. That curriculum as well is aligned to NAFME and Maryland Fine Arts Standards. They just switched over, they're new, so we wanted to make sure that that alignment was present for both curricula. It is, again, based scope and sequence for teachers, and our our visual arts curriculum is based on artists' habits of mind, so it's like artists are ambassadors and so forth. It is, again, unit-based. Sample lesson plans are provided, as well as assessments. And again, we did want to make sure that we made efficient use of all of the resources that we have. Baltimore is very rich in arts, and so we wanted to make sure that we leveraged our partnerships that we have within the city, as well as resources that we have from those partners, and had that embedded in the curriculum. Oh, I have some other notes, I'm sorry. We wanted to make sure that students see themselves in the curriculum that were offered. We definitely heard some of the feedback that we got from some of the board meetings as well, from parents, as well as members of the board. Wanted to make sure that that was very much evidenced in the curriculum that we brought forth to our students. So that is definitely the case. It features both curricula features some Baltimore artists as well as educators who are published. For an example, Marcus Smith, he is a choral director at Baltimore City College High School. Marcus has works that have been published and performed not only here in the United States but abroad, and so we thought it important that our students experience some of Mr. Smith's works, either by way of performance or at least having it embedded within a curriculum so that they do listen and hear. We did use board feedback to address revisions within this version of the curriculum. One of the things that I think that you'll see, one of the concerns that the board members had was how there was the example that we got was why are students learning to use a pencil in pre-kindergarten and they're still learning to use a pencil to draw in high school. So that was one of the concerns that we immediately addressed, and just wanted to make sure that we indicated that our students start fine arts programs at different levels. And so while that skill might still be important, it is diversified, is scaffolded according to the level of the student. So while the skill might be the same, the work that students have to do is relevant to the grade level. Our enhancements for the upcoming revisions. We will continue to devise lesson suggestions and units that are congruous with standards addressed. Continue to increase use of area arts venues as integral parts of the curriculum for both curricula. Continue to develop and align field trip opportunities for our students, and revise curriculum as needed to be sure that we meet college and career readiness standards for our high schoolers. Dance and theater curricula is upcoming. We'll be doing a draft for that over the summer. And I wanted to make sure that we, again, leverage some of the partnerships that we have in Baltimore City by pulling on some of the expertise that we have around us. So I did reach out to Dr. Vince Thomas, who's a professor of dance at Towson University, as well as Linda Denise Fisher-Harrell, who is, she's an alumna of Baltimore School for the Arts and faculty for Towson University. Ms. Fisher-Harrell is also she used to dance for Ailey, so she's definitely a resource that we have and very proud to be able to leverage all of her expertise. And then our partners at Center Stage, Michael Wiggins is Director of Education there, who will be helping us draft the theater curriculum. With regard to professional development, it's something that I am very, very passionate about for teachers, and I wanted to make sure that the areas that we focused on was kind of two-pronged, and one of those was capacity building, which in this sense I just wanted to make sure that teachers had the skill that they needed to be able to bring forth the skills within the students. And so by doing that, I have started to do it through professional development for them. Fine arts, our PD locations have included the Walters Art Museum, Baltimore Museum of Art, Morgan State University, Center Stage, the Meyerhoff and Rosso Music Center. Our teachers are provided with opportunities to further develop as practitioners. So it's not just them getting what they need to be able to show students, it's also helping them to keep the due within the practice for themselves. That was something that we felt very strongly about, and I also used teacher feedback through surveys to be able to develop what the professional development needs were for teachers, as well as some of the things that they wanted to see happen. And City Schools partnerships with arts organizations, again, are leveraged to help extend more relevant and in-depth learning opportunities for our students. Some of the clinicians that we've had this year are Michael Wiggins, who's, again, the educational director for Center Stage, Alicia Muller for general music in Towson University, Dr. Rollo Dilworth from Temple University, Todd Klontz from Rosso Music Center, Susie Wolf from the Baltimore Museum of Art, and Brittany Powell from the Walters Art Museum. Commissioners, I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any at this point.
Thank you, Ms. Howard.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate the work that you are doing with fine arts. I looked at the menu from the last PD that you all did. I think it was systemic at Morgan. And in comparison to when I was teaching in the system and now, I think that the offerings are more diverse. And I think that they're beneficial for the teachers that we are serving and that are serving our young people. So I really want to applaud you for that work.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Now, is there a way within the curriculum, I know that we're using the National Core Arts Standards, we're aligning our curriculum to that. Is there a way, and I know what's in those, I know what's in them, but is there a way to give guidance to teachers to say that by the end of grade, for example, by the end of grade 2, these are the specific skills or things that students should know by the end of this grade level? Is there a way that we can explicitly do that per grade level?
There is. One of the things that we did with this curriculum cycle was to be able to offer, so not just according to the grade level commissioner, but by the end of this cycle. And so we know that fine arts in Baltimore City is challenging. It's challenging where you could start music in one school and transfer and maybe not have music in that other school. So what we did was we came up with a document that kind of gives, it's pretty fluid as far as where students start, but it definitely, I want to be pretty ambitious and say that it definitely gives a guarantee for where their end result will be within that term. So while it's a little bit difficult to say that for a blanket statement, all second graders in Baltimore City will start at this point and end at that point, what we can say is if a student starts here, and we use assessment, if the student starts here, by the time they end this cycle of music, they'll be at this place, which does give teachers a way to be able to measure the improvement that students have done. And I'm sure, remembering from your tenure here at Baltimore City, that was kind of difficult to do, because when you have the staunch, I guess, way of putting it, where, students at this, we look at curriculum and says, well, students at kindergarten should start here, where many of our students were not starting
Sure.
there. And so that was a huge roadblock for much of our educators. So what we did was we said, well, what if we did this, and we provided, I guess, for lack of if you can imagine a circle, spiral, kind of sort of like this, so where the students start at one point and we always come back to that 3 years. So then it's, again, building on. So it's kind of like the example I gave, where the wherever they start is where they start, wherever, because we can't put them if they're not there. So wherever they start is where they start. However, the materials that we use are age appropriate, if that answers your question.
Kind of. I understand.
Thank you.
What does equity look like with our specialized school programs, our pre-professional programs, perhaps maybe like a school for the arts or design school? How does this curriculum align to the programs that they have that exist in their schools?
I can have an answer for you in April. I'll reach out to those programs to see.
Okay. And then with the partners, I'm on slide 11. With the partners for both dance and theater, I would recommend, since we are partnering with young audiences, and they are developing a wonderful summer learning program, I would suggest and recommend that we partner with them, because they do have curriculum experts that are in schools that are working with principals and school leaders and arts teachers to shape some programming at their individual schools. Also with the theater drafting partner, well, and also with dance, I would also recommend reaching out to Sharena Christmas, who is with Muse 360. She does a lot of work with programs throughout. I want to say she's on the Greater Baltimore Cultural Alliance. She serves on several boards, but she's very connected within the dance community, especially in regards to children of color. And then also at Baltimore School for the Arts, Miss Rosalind Cawthorn, I believe. She's the theater department head there. And I think that it would be wise for us to utilize her as a resource, as she is a teacher within our system with pre-professional students, to kind of help us move forward in drafting that curriculum.
I thank you.
One other, just building on that, that was a great point about young audiences. And then also Karen Saar, I've just had kids go through her programs, theater, that's a middle school program that is very inclusive and great. It might be a theater resource for you as you're drafting another educator in our system. This came up with visual music a lot in the fair student funding conversation, and that principals are making tough decisions about, and I have to say, of the community forums I went to, our parents and our community members are wanting, like you could imagine, visual arts and music. I don't think any parent would say that they don't want this for their students. And so I guess my question is the same as we're adopting this curriculum. I'd like the same kind of quick audit. Like, okay, elementary, middle school, and high school, how many people receive art, visual art, and how many receive music. I do feel like as we're adopting this curriculum, that I think we have to be really clear with how many students are being offered this and how many students are not. And I think that's a question that the board and the community needs to grapple with.
We are in the middle of a draft for a policy. It's called the Baltimore Arts Education Initiative, where we are looking at all of those things, and we'll be able to share out with the board very soon our findings. And one of the things that definitely powers the work is being able to deal in accurate numbers so that we can definitely find out the exact answer to that question. In addition to that, Chief Conley has definitely asked Chanel not just the numbers, but also we want to do an evaluation of quality of programming because we do, I don't need to tell you guys the history and how arts shapes the lives of students. So Chief Conley is definitely, that's an important part of the work that he has assigned me in addition to those answers. So we will have those.
All right, and lastly, our next steps. So just to wrap things up, from now until the summer, we'll be doing curriculum updates. They'll be made, we'll continue to be making those with the staff and teachers, teacher leaders. In March, we'll be having we're very excited that we're going to have our community engagement session for interested parents, community members, and teachers. It's going to be held on March 14th at Baltimore Design School from 5 to 7 p.m. So we'll have fine arts and math that evening, where we'll do an overview of our curriculum, and then students and parents and community members will have the opportunity to engage in some math and fine arts activities while they're visiting with us. So we're excited about that, and we hope that we have a large turnout so everybody can see the great work that the teachers are doing with the students. In April, the executive summaries and the scope and sequence documents will be provided for the Board of School Commissioners to review during the April 10th executive session. And then in May, the summary of the curriculum updates along with the executive summary and scope and sequences will be shared with the Board of School Commissioners and general public for feedback on April 24th. And then lastly, the Board of School Commissioners will vote on the curriculum approval on May 8th. Are there any last questions?
So I would just go, thank you so much for having the community engagement session on March 14th. Please go above and beyond with invitations, proactively inviting. We have so many community members that have come out that are very interested in this topic, and go above and beyond. Be relentless in making sure people show up to that session. I think that's going to be really important. I think people are very interested in this topic, so thanks.
Have we piloted the curriculum plan in schools? Have we done that?
So the math curriculum is currently in place across the district. So it's up for, this right now is up for the curriculum approval that Janice mentioned at the beginning. I know you could probably speak to that better than me. But the curriculum right now in pre-K through pre-calculus is Eureka Math.
And we do have units that are being piloted right now for the fine arts. The artifacts are due this week and next week, so I should have some of those to share.
And the teachers are providing feedback on they'll be providing feedback on those artifacts and how effective or ineffective they've been so that we can continue this process?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I would just add that one piece that we're really doing across all content offices in teaching and learning is much more around teacher surveys. So both surveys where they are actually filling out information, but also surveys as part of the professional development ongoing, so that we're not only just getting information sidehand, but getting it directly from teachers as we work with them.
And that leads right to the question that I was going to ask, which is, with the surveys, with the teacher feedback, do you have a sense of how many teachers are responding? Are we getting response from throughout the district or certain school? That may be impossible to get, but I was just curious.
So I can speak directly for mathematics. Part of our way of getting the survey results from teachers is that's part of their attendance. So when they come to our sessions, we ask them to do that at the beginning and the end so that they come in and that's sort of like their attendance, their marker of being there. And then at the end is their exit ticket, really. So we're really getting good feedback this year around our professional learning because all teachers that are coming are giving us very candid feedback about what's great and what they really still need after the sessions.
And for fine arts, our community is quite a bit smaller, but all of our teachers, the majority of our teachers that attend professional development do participate in the surveys. And I think that number has grown from August to January because teachers are starting to see that their feedback is what I use to power professional learning.
Thank you.
And Chanel, that group that you mentioned, the Baltimore, can you say that group again? The Education Arts,
Baltimore Arts Education Initiative.
and you play a very important role on that group, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because you have to. You have to.
Janice and Commissioner Conley are also parts.
Okay, good.
The only comment that I have, and perhaps there is enough time, given that we're going to have the engagement session in March, is it just seems a very short turnaround from the time when the summaries and things are shared with the board, and then we're talking about community and some feedback, to the time when we're actually going to be voting approval. So I don't know if there's some way, again, I think the same way that we advertise the March date, really letting people know that, because that's the important piece that folks are going to want to look at in terms of us voting, those full scope and sequences and things.
Absolutely.
So that just seems like almost within like a week's time almost. So just be aware of that.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
And we're moving along to the update on our pipeline work around teacher and school leaders.
Good morning, Commissioners. I want to begin with by talking about the blueprint. The blueprint calls out our responsibility to provide a world-class education for all of our students. That means we need to know and educate our students as whole people. That means we need to improve literacy teaching, and that means that all staff members need to take leadership roles to connect with, support, inspire, and challenge our students. The Kerwin Commission recently released its preliminary report in January and called out a couple of building blocks of a world-class education system. They included assuring an abundant supply of highly qualified teachers and creating a leadership development system that develops leaders at all levels. And those two building blocks are closely aligned with the work that we're doing in city schools and what we are sharing with you today. That preliminary report also had some language that gives important context for our conversation today, so I want to read a couple lines from that. It stated, the state faces a significant and growing shortage of highly qualified teachers. If the state hopes to have a system that performs at the level of the world's best systems, it simply must invest in elevating the status of the teaching profession so that more of our most talented young people and adults choose to become and remain successful teachers. So I have shared previously a couple of data points with the board that I want to remind you of today. So enrollment in Maryland higher education programs preparing certified teachers dropped from more than 6,000 in just after 2000 to less than 4,000 when last reported a couple of years ago. And partly because of that, in 2015, the state reported that 2/3 of the new teacher hires all across Maryland actually came from outside of the state due to our lack of supply here locally. When we look at actually the supply and demand across the state, so Maryland districts hire about 6,000 teachers every year. Our own universities here graduate fewer than 3,000 certified teachers every year. And when we look at some high need areas, that is even more of a stark difference. So Maryland districts altogether hire about 400 math teachers every year, but our universities here graduate fewer than 100 math teachers every year. I want to also, as some context for what you'll hear today about our approaches, give some context related to the demographics of our teaching force right now. So from the early 2000s until the early 2010s, so during a roughly 10-year period, City Schools was among many large urban districts across the country that experienced a significant decline in African American teachers as a percentage of all teachers. This percentage has stabilized, but we know that it needs to increase. When I say it has stabilized, today 44% of our teachers identify as African American. That's the highest that percentage has been in 7 years. This is important to call out because we know that students benefit from teachers who represent both the diversity of backgrounds, but also role models that they can directly identify with. So as you'll see today, we continue to work with a range of educator preparation programs to meet the annual demand for new teachers and new teachers who, as much as possible, reflect the backgrounds of our students in a place where the supply is not enough. So finally, I think more generally to that, as we talk about our work with pipelines, we are focused more generally on equity. That means equity in access to teaching positions, equity in the opportunity for success and satisfaction once educators are in roles in the district, equity in student-facing representation, and equity in opportunities to grow leadership. So before I turn it over to the team, I just want to also call out that today's update reflects past practice in part, in that we are focusing on providing information that is specific to alternative certification programs for teachers and leaders. However, today's update also reflects our intention to expand this conversation to reflect our work more comprehensively on pipelines and pathways. So while in the past, when we have talked to you about pipelines, we've done so specifically with reference to alternative pipelines, but there is much more than just our work on alternative pipelines. So hopefully today is feels a little less specific and more comprehensive for the work that we're doing. Thanks. Do you want to start by introducing yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Sarah Deal. I'm the Executive Director of Recruitment and Staffing in the Office of Human Capital.
Good morning. Good morning. Roxanne Ford, Director of Leadership Development and Support.
Good morning. Diane Sellers, Manager of Teacher Recruitment.
All right, so as Jeremy said, the intention of this presentation is really to provide an update on teacher pipelines more broadly, as well as future recruitment strategies, and then to provide an update on school leader pipeline programs and strategies as well. All right, so let's start with teachers. So new teacher pipelines. So our goal really is to provide a robust, high quality, diverse pool of teacher candidates for principals to choose from as we fill the 500 or so vacancies that we have annually. So as you can see, we hired 518 teachers in school year 16-17, and this year we hired around 424 new teachers for 17-18. And we attribute the decrease in new teacher hires this school year in part to an overall decrease in positions as a result of last year's fiscal challenge. But nevertheless, as you'll see, the proportion of new hires that we hire through traditional preparation programs relative to alternative pipelines has stayed relatively constant. So approximately half of the new teachers are graduates from our traditional teacher preparation programs, and the remaining new teachers are sourced through one of our 3 alt-route programs, which, as you likely know by now, are Baltimore City Teaching Residency, or BCTR, Teach for America, TFA, and Urban Teachers, we refer to as UT. Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay. All right, so we do think that it's important for you to have a broad understanding of the composition of our most recent teacher cohort hires. So this provides a breakdown of the 424 new teachers hired for this school year by job title and content area. So I'm just going to point out a couple of things. So as you'll see, about 35 to 38% of our new teacher hires are either pre-K teachers or elementary teachers. So approximately 160 of the 424 are teaching primarily elementary. Our next highest area is then teacher secondary, which, as you know, covers a broad array of content areas or certification areas. But about 30% of the new teachers were teacher secondary, with the largest proportions in English and math at around 9%. And then the next highest area is special ed. So about 20% of the new hires were teacher special ed, which equates to about 87 teachers this past year. Okay, this slide shows a deeper dive into the 2017-18 new teachers by content area and pipeline. So as you'll see, BCTR brought in about 70 teachers this past year, TFA 91, Urban Teachers 35, and through the traditional preparation programs, about 226 of the 424 teachers that we brought in. A couple of things to point out. So for teacher elementary, the traditional preparation programs provided the majority. So it provided 86, whereas collectively for the alt-route programs, they brought in around 63. But for teacher secondary, the alt-route programs collectively brought in more teacher secondary teachers than our traditional programs provided. And again, the highest numbers were in English and math. I think what's also interesting to point out here is that our traditional programs provide the majority of the teachers in the K-12 cert areas, which up here are sort of art, your foreign languages, health and PE, and music, as well as teacher vocational. And then as you'll see near the bottom, teacher special ed was relatively consistent from the alt-route programs and the traditional preparation programs. All right, we did want to provide you guys with a snapshot of the top 5 colleges and universities that were attended by our traditional teacher candidates this year. So as you can see in descending order, they were Towson, Morgan State, Coppin, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and College of Notre Dame. We will certainly continue monitoring and providing updates around this for future presentations. All right, so looking ahead, here are the alternative pipeline projections for school year 18-19. So as you'll see, both BCTR and TFA intend to bring in around 100 residents and core members respectively across a variety of sort of content certification areas. Each of those programs intend to bring in probably around a quarter of residents and or core members for special ed. As you may know right now, we have approximately, I think 68 to 70 urban teacher residents in our schools, which we believe will translate into about 58 new teachers for the start of next school year. So again, as a collective, we anticipate that probably around 250 teachers will come through the alt-route programs next year. All right, so pipeline goals and metrics. This is exciting. So this year, for the first time ever, we worked collaboratively with each of our alternative teacher pipeline programs to develop goals and metrics in the following areas. So recruitment, we sort of sat down with each program on the front end, tried to discern sort of what the overarching number was going to look like, but also by content area based on sort of what folks thought they were able to provide and what we need. Effectiveness, so we looked at the percentage rated effective or highly effective by cohort year. So for example, Teach for America provided that same percentage for their 2016 cohort and their 2017 cohort. And then finally, retention is extraordinarily important to all of us, the pipeline programs as well as city schools. So we started looking at the percentage of the cohorts that complete the current school year, start the following year, and then complete the following year. And this is exciting new practice for us, so this will provide baseline data to inform our work moving forward. All right, so additional new teacher pipelines. So we really are seeking to develop or enhance the following pipeline programs to ensure that we have a robust, high quality, really diverse supply of teachers for our school leaders to select from. So we are currently exploring developing our own Maryland-approved alternative preparation program. We're exploring the feasibility of this right now. Essentially, what this would provide us is this would enable us to potentially broaden the pool of teachers that we're able to hire by allowing them to test in, so to take the praxis to demonstrate content knowledge. It could also provide a clear pathway of professional development to enable them to move to professional certification. So we are currently in the research phase of this, but we would be looking to potentially launch it 2019-20. We are also exploring restarting the Para-to-Teacher program. So we've been partnering with the BTU to restart and enhance this program. In recent conversations with the union, we've learned that there are a number of paras who are currently partway through the program. So we think that that might be sort of a fantastic entryway into restarting the program. And then finally, we really are working to continue building out our student teacher pipeline. So we're currently discerning their interest in working for city schools, as well as really working to develop a streamlined application process to fast track hiring. All right, and now I'm going to turn it over to Diane Sellers to talk about recruitment strategy highlights.
So this year we're attending approximately 28 events. So we are prioritizing events that are specifically for certified teacher candidates or seniors who are in schools of education to really increase that pool. So we're engaging traditional candidates across Maryland and other states to attract them to teach in Baltimore. We've also partnered with the ESOL office to target specific schools to build the candidate pool in ESOL because we realize that that is a growing need in our district. And so we've expanded to campuses in Florida, Wisconsin, and Massachusetts this year in order to attract those candidates. And as Sarah mentioned, we are really trying to dive deep into our PDS partnerships. So for context, PDS partnerships are partnerships between colleges and universities and districts that allow for student teachers to teach within schools. And so we're really developing the process for streamlining hiring and offering early contracts to those candidates. Currently, we have 11 colleges and universities in Maryland that we partner with. Something that is really, really important to us and that Jeremy mentioned is really trying to figure out how do we increase the number of African American teachers that we're hiring every year. And so we partner with our HBCUs in Maryland, two of which are PDS partners, so Coppin and Morgan are PDS partners with us. Beyond that, what we are exploring is how do we partner with HBCUs beyond just targeting students in their schools of education, because many times their schools of education are really small, their cohorts are really small. For example, Morgan is only graduating 14 students out of their school of education this spring, but there are other departments that are really strong in our HBCUs, including science departments, math departments, and the arts. So we're really exploring how do we partner with those departments to attract candidates to teach in Baltimore. And then targeting HBCUs across the country, focusing on those that are closer to Baltimore, that are higher producers of teachers. So there are a list of schools that are higher producers of teachers, and how are we targeting those campuses and getting in front of those candidates. Something else that we're doing is we're moving the deadline for declaring for non-tenured teachers to resign from our district from July 15th to May 1st for non-tenured teachers, and we're offering early contracts, particularly in high-needs areas. And just to reiterate about our alternative certification program, so our partners are really instrumental in helping us to expand our reach to campuses that we otherwise would not have a presence in. And so we really appreciate those partnerships for that extended reach that they have. So they're helping us to bring in more Black and brown teachers to Baltimore. In addition, they're helping us bring in candidates that are in Maryland and from Baltimore who otherwise we would not be able to reach in our recruitment efforts, since we are really focused on schools of education. So they're able to focus on candidates who did not major in education and have an interest in teaching.
The final item we've called out on this slide is that we are working to launch a new applicant tracking system early this spring, which will also help us in our recruitment efforts by really streamlining the process both for applicants and for hiring managers. So it's really an operational improvement that we think is important to go along with the more strategic improvements and work that we're talking about.
Jeremy, what programs are we looking into
For
that new applicant tracking system?
we considered a few different vendors, as well as continuation of our current in-house program that we've used for, I think, 7 years for an applicant tracking system. And we will be soon bringing forward a proposal to the board to contract with an organization called People Admin.
Going to check and see, if you don't mind, if there are any other questions around the teacher piece, and then, are you okay?
Yeah.
Did you have one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can we go to the, sorry. I had two questions. One is, can you just, with the para to teacher program, I actually think that's, as a kind of pipeline to building a great diverse teaching workforce. How many paras do we have in the system right now, and what's the possibility there? I just would like to know that. If you know it off the top of your head, that's great. And what size of a program could we imagine? Would love any insight there, or you could get back to me if you don't know that off the top of your head.
We just looked at these numbers last week, so there are roughly 700, I think, paraprofessionals in the district right now, including general education paraprofessionals, special education paraprofessionals, and then pre-K and ESOL. And so in the past, when the para-to-teacher program was being implemented, we found that paras were coming into the program at very different stages of their own education, which meant that in some cases someone may enter the program where it would take years and years as a full-time paraprofessional, taking a couple of courses each semester to get to the point where they could be eligible for teaching. So we've recently talked about how to refine the entrance criteria to make sure that the investment is a little bit more targeted to paras who are closer to being ready and being ready both in terms of academics, but ready in terms of their interest in teaching. And we've talked about whether there are particular groups of those paraprofessionals, so whether it is ESOL paraprofessionals, for example, that we should also target given our needs for teachers.
Okay, my second question is on the metrics piece. So, I don't know which side, it is slide 9. So, we have asked for a while and been patient on the effectiveness piece. So at the end of the day, we know what the data says. You know, virtually every teacher is effective or highly effective in our system, and based on our rating system on levels 3 or 4. And so to be honest, it doesn't really tell us much. It's a baseline. It's an expectation of effective or highly effective. What we really need to understand is we are doing so many formative and summative assessments. You know, what is, and I think the programs want to know too, like what is their impact on student achievement? Like, you know, and can we provide, and I've always been told that we don't have the data or we got to get the systems together, but it's great that we're coming together, but shouldn't we be able to kind of make a statement about student achievement and then share that data publicly about which programs are, because at the end of the day, it is about recruitment and retention, but it's also about effectiveness. So I don't think this effectiveness barometer gets us where we want to go.
I appreciate that, Commissioner.
Yeah.
I will say just a couple of things for the record before I address your questions. One is, although Sarah has shared that this is the first time with our alternative certification partners, we have set goals in these areas. These are data that we have monitored every year. I think we've provided data on these points to the board every year.
Right,
So I don't want our what we consider as an improvement of setting goals here to indicate that this is the first time we're looking at this information. And then you are, your statement's accurate that most of our teachers are rated effective or highly effective every year. It's about 85% who end up being rated effective or highly effective. So I will say we are engaging in conversations with our partners about how to look, instead of just at effectiveness ratings through our teacher evaluation system, to look at actual student achievement data. So we're working with the Office of Achievement Accountability and Human Capital. Really one of our alt-cert program partners came forward and asked for this, and it makes sense for us to think about it more broadly. So I think the next time you hear from us with an update here, we'll have some information like what you're asking for.
Eureka and the math, we're doing 8. I mean, that's one place. You know, we have a consistent, formative, and interim summative assessments with ANET. It just aligned curriculum. Anyway, it just seems that would be a good data point.
I'm going to move us, because we do have to sort of catch up here now, okay? We'll go on to the school leaders.
All right. For school leaders, our goal is to develop a pipeline of principals who are prepared to transform and lead our schools. So currently, what we have school leader standards that we're developing, as well as a high-quality induction program. We are using selective hiring and strategic placement, as well as then supports for evaluation and development of those leaders. Currently, what we have for effective and highly effective new teachers, we're looking at this, what is the retention rate? Because we want our principals to be able to retain highly effective teachers. We're currently at 27% of our 5-year highly effective teachers. We want to grow that to at least 37%. We are also looking at the stability of our effective and highly effective school leaders who have been in the same school for 3+ years. Currently, that is at 53. We want to provide the support and the development in order to increase that number as well to 75. We are currently using the Aspiring Principal Program, which is the new Teachers Leaders Centers program. We have been using that, and the data up here is for the past 3 years. Typically, we have 10 participants per year, and at the end of their 1-year residency, they are either placed in the role of principal or assistant principal. So you can see the data and how it tracked for 3 years. Okay. At the beginning of the 17-18 school year, we had 29 principal residents who had successfully completed that program. And of those, we have retained 15 principals and 7 assistant principals. We know that our attrition rate needs to be addressed as far as school leadership goes. We are typically losing an average of 20 principals a year. So we need to make sure that we are looking at that to determine the reasons and how we are going to prepare and fill those gaps with the correct person in order to decrease that number. What we have been developing this year and will continue to develop and look at is we do have an assistant principal leadership program, which is in draft, which is a 2-year induction program. So for our assistant principals, we are going to work on developing them in areas that will lead them to a successful seat as a school principal. We also have a principal leadership program, which will be for a total of 4 years, with at year 3 really turning to leading for change and what does rigor look like so that we can ensure that our student data is moving and our principals are getting the support they need. We have updated the Principal Assessment Center, and we have logic built in, so hopefully that will result in better matches for principals with schools based upon school profiles and their needs. We also have professional learning communities, which we have begun to really work with the leads, and these will be led by principals, for principals, so that they can start to look at, we're starting first with those elements of the blueprint, so we will have principal communities around both whole child and around literacy. And they're going to be taking the knowledge that they are gaining through working with teaching and learning, and what does that look like at the site? How can they learn from one another to really get better faster? We also have an instructional framework, which we currently use, and we want to make sure that we are giving effective feedback. We don't want to say to teachers, this is your score, this is what you're good at, these are opportunities for improvement, but we want to give effective feedback so that they know the next steps, and that's the expectation of a school leader. So we are working to make sure that we have opportunities for principals to gain that knowledge. We are in the process of an assistant principal redesign. This is addressing the responsibilities and the role of the assistant principal so that that is clear and it is clearly aligned to instructional leadership. There will also be an assessment center which will be part of that movement as folks move into that role. Also, for the past few years, assistant principals have not been receiving the same level of professional development as our teachers and principals. So that is also going to be a push to make sure that we are developing them and supporting them. As far as a pipeline to move into assistant principal, we are in talks with both Towson University and Morgan State University to take our teacher leaders who really have strong backgrounds in content and are ready for a leadership role so that we can then move them through this program, which will lead to a master's degree and an Admin 1 certification, ready to move into the role of assistant principal. These courses that are part of this program will be slightly different because we are going back to having those co-facilitated and co-taught by city schools personnel as well. So our ILEDs, some principals, some central office staff will be co-facilitating those. That way we know that we are getting the information to our up-and-coming leaders that they really need to have in order to address our students. We are also bringing back, because it was here before, the Leadership Talent Development Initiative, and this really centers around making sure our leaders have the skills to retain our top-notch teachers and give them the support and development that they need in order to stay with us. Okay. And questions, comments?
Why have we taken so long in developing the assistant principal pipeline?
Currently, with the design that we have in place, schools principals have the autonomy to have an assistant principal or not. So we have a lot of assistant principals who have been in that role for a number of time, a length of time, and we haven't had new assistant principals coming into that role, which has created somewhat of a lack of development in that area. And it's not to say that they don't need it. They do need it, even if they continue in that role.
And even the assistant principals that we have currently, I'm looking through the slides and I've looked through them previously. There really is no, and I'm glad that we're here on slide 18, there really is no development for assistant principals currently.
Correct.
So ideally, we are not retaining them in the event that there are vacancies for school leaders. Just a question that I had to know, why we haven't done work around developing assistant principals.
And we appreciate that comment. We also see a need that is an area that we need to make sure we address moving forward.
I would just add that the position that Roxanne currently sits in is a position that was added in this fiscal year specifically because of the need that you've raised to provide more coordinated rather than haphazard or organic or just organic development for our assistant principals. And I would just emphasize that as Roxanne was sharing, she said that some of the development of assistant principals in the induction program will really focus on providing them with the development that will put them on the path toward becoming a school principal. We know that not everyone who becomes an assistant principal wants to become a principal, but this is a part of a pipeline toward the principalship so that we can grow our teachers into assistant principals and our assistant principals into principals.
Thank you, Chief Skinner.
No, you do assistant principals.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I was very interested in the discussion around developing the roles and responsibilities. And it was sounding as though we were moving toward, I'm almost feel like I'm going back to the future, but moving toward the idea of assistant principal as an instructional leader versus what seems to have has sort of morphed into assistant principal as sort of the catch-all kind of person for all kinds of things within the building. And so if in fact it's going to move into that role of instructional leader, then it may actually come up with a two-prong description for those people that may not want to become eventually principals, but still do need to understand instruction if you're going to be a part of a leadership team in the school. But I'm happy to hear that, but it was interesting to sort of hear that as you're going through.
Thank you. And I appreciate the presentation. And Ms. Ford, I'm so glad that you're leading this effort for us as one of our most highly effective principals that was retained, who groomed leaders for the system. You're an incredible model to be leading this effort, and I'm so glad that you're here. As people know, this has been I've been hammering this around leadership. I think with our fair student funding model that we've adopted and the way that, and when we tour the city, one differentiator is a highly trained, principal and leadership team really make a difference. And I think we have completely underinvested in this as a system. And so it's great that you're here and building this out. I guess when I see this, I actually don't think it's enough. I actually feel like, you know, when I joined the board, we were turning over 30 to 35 principals a year. It's good that we're turning over around 20 principals a year. But at the end of the day, I feel like we need to more aggressively train and develop aspiring assistant principals and aspiring principals. And I love the fact that you're leading an effort where our people, like our great ILEDs, are partnering with universities. So we're taking ownership of this. I love that, and I think we could have a vision of developing a leadership development academy that we could have cadres of people, but I do worry that it's not enough. It's not enough people. I know it's a starting point. So we as a board, how can we help? Leadership's a priority in the blueprint, and I think it's one of the underdeveloped pieces, right? So we can, like, I want to know as a board member, what do we need to kind of blow this out more? And how, in tough budget times, can we talk to the CEO, and you all talk to the CEO about, if this is a priority, how can we build upon this? I think it's one of the most strategic investments we can make. I feel like board members are there, but we want to see how we can be supportive of on the principal side.
Commissioner Canham, I appreciate hearing that as well, and the support and the push for us to do more of this. And I will just say for now that we are having those conversations with the CEO about how, looking forward, we need to invest in our internal capacity to do this and more of this. And I appreciate that the board back in December approved the appointment of Ashley Stewart, who is Executive Director of Talent and Organizational Development, who brings that role is focused on the things that you said as well, but was a role that had not been filled for quite some time in the district. So we've been expanding just in the last year in our internal capacity, and I do think you will see more to come.
Madam Chair, I know we have to move on. I have a question. Are we providing incentives for teacher leaders or folks that want to go into the school leadership pipeline? Are we providing incentives for them? Do we provide reimbursement? Is that a part of what we are currently doing?
Yes, part of the assistant principal partnerships with Towson and Morgan will be a direct pay reimbursement so that it will be at minimal cost to teachers per course.
Because generally teacher leaders that are preparing to go into school leadership already have a master's degree, so they're probably looking at just the extra credits needed for that Admin 1 certification.
And that's another option for them as well.
I would just add that, yes, all of our teachers are eligible for tuition reimbursement every year for up to 12 credits. So regardless of whether you're a part of a program like that or just taking the individual courses that are needed to prepare, you have that support. There is probably a lot more to say than the time we have about other opportunities for teacher leaders. I will just call out that the pathways that are represented in our teacher salary schedule and our teacher roles represent the beginning of the opportunity for teachers to develop leadership. So we have several hundred model teachers, identified model teachers in the district, and then after becoming a model teacher, teachers have the option to pursue becoming a lead teacher. That is a teacher position that was really intended and plays out as a role that is similar to an administrator in a school, but serving in a teacher capacity.
Thank you. Okay,
Thank
we'll
you.
look forward to the next update, and if we can be of any further support, please do let us know. This is an important area for us. Time for some deep dive into data, right? Looking at the kindergarten readiness assessment results. I know we had the preliminary report for this. I had a pleasure of watching you all on the live stream at the last board meeting. So this is our chance to get a little more information. Thank you.
Good morning. Shane Hall, Director of Research.
Hi, Crystal Francis, Director of Early Learning Programs.
Good morning, Janice Lane, ED of Teaching and Learning.
2 weeks ago, we gave you kind of an overview of the kindergarten readiness assessment results. The assessment is administered in the fall of 2017. What we gave you in the overview 2 weeks ago mostly looked at the composite scores and comparison with other LEAs, as well as showing changes in city schools' performance over the past year. What we're going to do this morning is go a level deeper, looking mostly at domain level scores on the KRA.
As we stated before, this is the 4th year for administration of KRA. The testing window again was from September 5th through October 20th. And the domains that it measures are language and literacy, mathematics, social foundations, physical well-being, and motor development.
As we reported to you earlier this month, city schools saw an improvement in kindergarten readiness rates, rising 2.9 percentage points between 2016 and 2017, compared to a 2-point rise for the state over the same time period. This represents a narrowing of the readiness gap between city schools and the state to within 5 points. Across the 4 domains assessed by the KRA, we demonstrated an increase in 3 of the 4, with the only exception being math, in which there was only a slight decrease. The greatest increases were in the social foundations and physical development domains. Despite overall improvements, there are large gaps in kindergarten readiness by race, ethnicity, English learner, and disability status. We will show you more about that today. We continue to see success for students who attended city schools pre-kindergarten programs, as these students demonstrated higher rates of kindergarten readiness than the state and other public pre-kindergarten programs on all domains of the KRA except for math. Here's an overview of what we presented you 2 weeks ago, just a recap. You can see on the right side the proportion demonstrating kindergarten readiness, nearly 41% compared to 45% for the state overall. Here is a year-to-year comparison for 2016 and 2017 that illustrates the narrowing of the kindergarten readiness gap between city schools and the state. Here we show the readiness rates for all students with the bar on the left there as kind of a reference point for you, and then the rate for the 3 largest racial and ethnic groups within city schools: African Americans, Hispanic and Latinos, and whites. And as you can see, there are substantial readiness gaps among the 3 groups. Between African American and white students, a gap of about 17.5 percentage points, and between Hispanic and Latino students and whites, a gap of about nearly 25.5 percentage points. In addition, there is a gap of nearly 8 points between African American and Hispanic and Latino students. We also notice gaps in kindergarten readiness by gender. Once again, we show all students on the left for readiness, and then male and female. And as you can see, boys trail girls in readiness by nearly 10 percentage points. And this is consistent with what a lot of studies show even nationally. With these 2 charts, we show readiness gaps by English learner status and by students with disabilities status. And as you can see, once again, we have the all students bar for reference, and then you'll see English learner and non-English learner, and then students with disabilities and non-disabled. So again, you'll see sizable gaps there. Here we're looking at the readiness of kindergarten students by domain, comparing city schools and the state. And as you can see, the greatest gap in readiness is in math between city schools and the state. They have nearly identical rates of readiness, however, when you look at the social foundations domain. And then on physical development, there's a gap of only about 1 percentage point. Here we see domain level results for city schools for both 2016 and 2017. And as you can see, we showed improvements across 3 of the 4 domains, again, decreasing only slightly in math. The greatest increases were in the social foundations and physical development domains, as well as a small increase on the language and literacy domain. Here we're showing readiness rates, both composite and domain level, for students who attended city schools pre-kindergarten programs in 2016 and 2017. As you can see from this chart, for students who attended pre-kindergarten in city schools, readiness improved overall and across most domains, again, the exception being math. Once again, the greatest improvement domain-wise was in that social foundations domain, where readiness increased by more than 3 points from a year ago. Here we want to draw a further comparison between the kindergarten readiness of students who previously attended city schools pre-kindergarten versus that of students in other prior care settings, that's that non-pre-K category, and that of the state overall. And as you can see, students who attended city schools pre-kindergarten showed greater rates of readiness in literacy, in math, higher than city school students in other prior care settings, such as at-home care and Head Start, among others, but trailed the state by about 6 points. Now, this is on the literacy and math domains, and this next slide, we show you the social foundations and physical development domains. And in both of these, students who had previously attended city schools pre-kindergarten showed greater readiness than their peers from those other prior care settings, as well as the state overall.
So on this slide, we wanted to kind of draw attention to some of the priorities that we're focusing on for this year and for next year. Again, as we stated before, for the 17-18 school year, we implemented the Eureka math curriculum in our pre-K and K classrooms. We have also started doing, through the Office of Early Learning, differentiated professional development. So over the course of this year, we've done about 10 differentiated sessions for our teachers, pre-K and K, and for our pre-K paras. We have also really been working toward increasing our collaboration between our Head Start teachers and pre-K and K teachers. On this past Professional Development Day on February 16th, we actually had about 150 pre-K, K, and Head Start teachers all come together to look at KRA data and do a deep dive so that they could see how, what it looks like in Head Start and then what it eventually looks like in pre-K and K. And then this year, we've also partnered with Ready at 5 to do an Institute on Literacy, and they have been working with 30 of our pre-K teachers and also with some of our Head Start teachers, and they have met about 3 times per year, and then they also have coaches that go into their classrooms throughout the course of the year. So for next year, in an effort to really kind of increase these scores, we really wanted to focus on some enrollment initiatives, really seeing if we can target and get more students enrolled into pre-K. MSDE has a pre-K curriculum that they are piloting next year, so we are going to offer to pilot that curriculum in some of our pre-K expansion classrooms. That curriculum is really heavily project-based, so we want to see if that is really going to make a difference for our students. We are also proposing to do a Ready at 5 symposium in math for all of our pre-K, a representative for each one of our schools. And then we are also working with the state for the Striving Readers Literacy Grant. 15% of that grant is set aside for birth through 5. So right now we're really kind of working through some programs and research-based ideas of what we could do to kind of bring that here and then make sure that there's an alignment between our K and 12 priorities.
And let me add, there are additional charts in the appendix of this presentation. For example, some breakouts of domain level among the various prior care settings.
Before I ask the others, one thing pops out to me really quick. Given what our data have looked like in terms of students attending our pre-K programs doing better in some cases than the state, why are we necessarily piloting the state's new curriculum? Is it as good as ours? I mean, are we doing it for comparison? Part of me wonders why we would change ours unless theirs is really wonderful.
I think we just kind of want to see what it's going to look like. So the pilot we're proposing is going to be in like maybe 4 classrooms, so not a lot.
Okay.
I think because it's project-based, which is really, it's allowing kids to have experiences, we wanted to see what it's going to look like. It's a free curriculum that the state is going to be offering for 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. So potentially it could go to childcare providers, it could go to Head Start. So there may be even a streamlining that is happening across the birth through 5 continuum. So that's why we really wanted to just take a look at it.
Okay. Because I wouldn't want to mess up something that's already working.
Yeah.
I just saying.
Any other questions? Did I ask? Oh, wow. No questions.
You did such a great job. He has no question. Mark this thing down. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to, I think you've honed in on what our next steps should be, and I would encourage folks to take a look at those other charts, but we do need to celebrate, something that we are doing and doing very well. So again, thank you for the hard work, and let's continue.
Thank
in
you,
this
Commissioners.
vein. Thank you. All righty, we're ready for the second quarter update for special education. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jalima Alisea, Coordinator of Specialized Instruction.
Good morning again. Still Janice Lane, ED of Teaching and Learning.
This morning, we'll be providing for you the second quarter update for special education. We will share with you those services and supports we've provided to schools so that they can implement effective services for students that are receiving special education and related services. We'll begin by, again, grounding us in the special education priorities, then sharing those progress monitoring key data matrix, then the specialized instruction updates and next steps. So again, the special education priorities are educating students in their least restrictive environment, providing access to high-quality instruction and services, and in doing that, closing the achievement gap for students that are receiving special education services. We do that through 4 buckets of work: planning, data analysis, professional development, and a tiered system of supports. The data that is used and analyzed through our special education stat that we first talked about when we came before you in November does inform the work that we are providing through professional development and planning, and the technical assistance that we're providing to our IEP chairs and our general and special educators. We have implemented a tiered system of supports based upon the weekly data that we review with data cleansing and suspension tracker. Again, in November, we came before you and talked about how we were expanding STAT. And during the school year 16-17, we began STAT again with a focus on compliance. This year, we've expanded STAT to include compliance, attendance, academics, and suspension. We meet monthly, aligning other offices, OAA, SELs from the school's office, ILEDs, teaching and learning, specialized instruction, and whole child, the Office of Suspension Services. During STAT, we review data, we talk about trends that we're seeing systemically as well as within our networks. we talk about targeted supports for our students that are receiving special education and related services. And we discuss interventions. During those trends, we look at best practices and how we can expand those best practices across the district. We also reviewed multiple data points looking at our special ed dashboard, our tracking reports that we discuss, and then we talk about next steps and how we can move forward. On the next slide, and we're going to ask that we cue up our video, we have a brief video of actually seeing the work in practice.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Special Education Staff. Today, I just want to ground everyone again in our priorities. Again, our priority for special education for 2017-18 is educating students in their least restrictive environment, access to high-quality instruction and services, and in doing that, closing the achievement gap for our students with disabilities.
Hello, I'm Joanne Stasik, and I'm the Special Ed Liaison for CLN 5, and I also cover in CLN 6. The STAT process has really helped for me to sit down with the specialists that I work with, the educational specialists that I work with in both CLN 5 and in 6. With some of the schools, we were able to sit down and look at the data during the STAT meeting, talk about the focuses that we had in our schools, and then we were able to go out together and combine our efforts in meeting with school teams and developing plans and developing action steps that both the school staff could take and that we could take in supporting their efforts around special ed and the challenges that they were having in special education.
My name is Courtney Hill, and I'm the educational specialist for CLN 7 and some of the high needs schools from CLN 5. And so how this STAT process has been helpful for me, it's given me the opportunity to connect with people I've already been working with around data. So it's kind of like two things I love are now being combined. I love working with my other specialists and with my SELs, and I love looking at data, but I've sort of been doing the second one in isolation for a long time. And so it's been really helpful to be able to bring these things that I've been working with for a while and get a fresh set of eyes and just look at things that I'm missing.
We're providing informed type of support to our schools by using those practices that we are implementing in our staff.
So what we found through this new STAT process is that we are making more informed decisions around professional development that is needed to provide better services for our students in their least restrictive environment. And we're able to see, again, the trends that we're seeing, not just in specific CLNs, but across the district. So as we begin to look at some of our data in our key progress monitoring keys. As far as our referrals, we see that we've seen an increase in our pre-K referrals, with primarily more than half of those coming from our parents. But in all other grade bands, there have been a decrease in the referrals of our students to receive special education services, or it's remained consistent. So for our 9 through 12, there was a slight increase, but for all the other grade bands, K through 8, there has been a decrease in referrals. And for those increase of referrals for our pre-K students that are coming from parents, there has been an increase in our child fine. In most local school systems, there's a child fine office. In our district, there's a child fine person. And so through the state mandate and initiative, we have been asked that we, through social media, through radio, begin to let parents know more about how they can refer students at earlier ages to receive those early intervening services, so that those supports can be put in place earlier, so that those students can receive those services and then be able to be phased off of those extra supports and services that may be needed. Prior to being referred, a student may receive additional interventions and supports around academics and behavior through a student support team. So we're working very closely as we review the data through STAT to see how many of our schools are actually implementing the student support team. We use that by looking at our special education dashboard to see that if we're finding high numbers of students that are being referred in a particular CLN or particular school, then that targets the type of support that is needed at the school. So a student may be referred after going through a student support team and having those interventions implemented. A student may be referred to receive special education services after being on a 504 plan. And we know a 504 plan are for students that have been identified with a disability, but they are just accessing support through accommodations and modifications and not necessarily an IEP. As we talked about students being referred, not all students that are referred are found eligible. And so as we see here, that many of our students that have been referred, the number has been decreased of those actually being found eligible. And once a student has been referred and they are not found eligible, then they are either then referred back to the student support team so that those additional interventions and supports can be put in place through the intervention. And we are really working very hardly with our schools and rigorously to make sure that we are not over-identifying students to receive special education services. So we are, again, targeting this work through our STAT process and our data analysis. Again, one of our priorities is to look at students receiving their services in their least restrictive environment. And although the state target is, again, at 70.4%, and we are currently at around 57%, some of our programmatic updates begins with a systemic PD that we are working with in March as we're collaborating with specialized instruction and the Office of Special Education to really unpack the standards in ELA and math to ensure that we are developing grade level standard-based IEP goals so that those goals are implemented in the student's least restrictive environment. We're also working very closely with all educators, both special educators and general educators, around inclusive practices, where these students are receiving their specially designed instruction, and central office professional development with a focus on LRE decision-making. So again, special education is not a placement, it's a service, and where those students are receiving their services. Our second quarter timeline compliance, we have seen a bump in some of those data cleansing reports, and some of the considerations are this time last year, or second quarter last year, we did not have as many delayed openings or school closing because of inclement weather. And so what we've put in place is through our STAT, the educational specialists and SELs have identified those schools that have been impacted by the weather, and we've worked with the IEP chairs to reschedule those teams and to develop action plans so that we can reschedule those teams within a timely fashion. We've also, as we heard earlier, staffing concerns. So how we are actually meeting the needs of those schools to see how we can reallocate staffing so that we can make sure that we're holding those meetings. And I do work collaboratively with the Office of Human Capital to address the staffing concerns. Also, within those compliance timelines, we are actually finding that the number of days to close IEPs has been shortened, which is a positive, so that we can ensure that we are implementing those IEPs that have been developed within a timely fashion. So planning ahead. Again, through the STAT process and the redesign of the STAT process, we have aligned to the special education priorities. Again, educating students in their least restrictive environment, assuring that all students have access to high-quality services and instruction, and then closing the achievement gap. We begin developing a systemic professional development plan with 3 major buckets: specially designed instruction, which is supplemental to the core instruction that all students are receiving; developing grade-level standard-based IEP goals, which will be implemented in the student's least restrictive environment, and really focusing on decision-making around receiving those services in the student's least restrictive environment. And then implementation, beginning in March with the first systemic implementation of developing and creating standard-based grade-level IEP goals using the ELE and math standards. And then our second annual Special Education Institute, which is open to both general educators, special educators, as well as school leaders, around specially designed instruction, standard-based IEP goals that are written on grade level, LRE decision-making, and as well as referral and eligibility process. Again, the ongoing PD, which includes systemic, which will also be done through webinars, grade level professional development and technical assistance within our schools. And then aligning our monitoring tools, our academic and IEP quality monitoring tools, so they are also aligned with our professional development and with our special education priorities. Again, keeping grounded in what our priorities are, special education and specialized instruction. We'll discuss next steps at the end of this presentation.
So specialized instruction is aligned to the special education priorities with regards to supporting high-quality instruction for students with disabilities. So we have goals in 3 areas of curriculum, assessment, and professional learning. So we're continuing to work toward ensuring students with disabilities have access to their grade level content, ensuring that teachers, leaders, and stakeholders are using a data-based decision-making approach, and that professional development and learning will ensure teachers and leaders are equipped to provide students with disabilities access to that high-quality instruction within their least restrictive environment. So we're working with various partners and offices to align and coordinate our efforts. This not only helps to ensure students with disabilities are provided rigorous instruction, but it also promotes opportunities to ensure instructional strategies are considered to meet the needs of all learners. So with regards to our collaboration with the Office of Special Education, we're collaborating with related service providers, specifically with speech and language pathologists around the cycles of professional learning and around assistive technology to ensure students have access to instructional materials. We realize the importance of ensuring that various stakeholders who are not teachers see their role in the 3-year academic goal and the cycles of professional learning, and therefore we're providing training to speech and language pathologists as well as IEP chairs around the cycles of professional learning. We provide training at IEP monthly chair meetings, and we're also, as Dr. Brooks discussed, we're also members of the STAT team and process. Collaboration with literacy, we're collaborating around the blueprint support, also collaborating to ensure that students have access to those accessible instructional materials. We're providing secondary literacy planning and joint webinars for 4th and 5th grade. So a team member from specialized instruction attends weekly literacy planning meetings with ACLs to ensure alignment of the content. Our collaboration with the school office, we're working with special education liaisons to align systemic PD to school-based support. We're also working with special education liaisons to ensure that we are identifying strategies for students with disabilities as they relate to our cycles of professional learning with regards to close reading and academic discourse. And we're working with special education liaisons and ILEDs with our heat map process with identification and investigation, which we'll talk about in a few slides. And then lastly, collaborating with our math department, we provided a professional development for systemic PD to all educators around universal design for learning, and that was aligned to the math Eureka curriculum. So now we're going to look at some quantitative data to see how students with disabilities are comparing to students who are general education students. So looking at the DIBELS performance for grades K to 2, this is the BOY to MOY data. We can see that the lowest gap in performance between students with disabilities and general education students for those students who improved their benchmark level in kindergarten is at 7.8%, and at grade 2 it's at 8.2%. For TRC, this is the performance of growth from BOY to MOY for grades 1 to 2. We can see that the gap between, the smallest gap between general education students and students with disabilities is at grade 2, and that's at 8.9%. So now we're going to look at some math data. This is the ANET data. As the math department discussed earlier, ANET measures student performance within with grade level math curriculum. So looking at window 1, again, we see a much more narrow gap between students with disabilities and general education students, with the smallest gap being at grades 6 to 8 at 6.7%. Looking at window 2, we continue to see a narrow gap with window 2, with the smallest gap again being at grades 6 to 8 at 9.1%. And I want to note here that students with disabilities do receive their accommodations for this assessment, which shows that when we ensure students with disabilities have their supports and their IEPs are being implemented, their performance is more aligned to that of their non-disabled peers. I also want to note, too, that we did a lot of work and emphasis for systemic PD with regards to math instruction for special education teachers to ensure that they were equipped to plan and implement the math curriculum aligned to the students' IEPs. So now looking at some qualitative data, we gathered qualitative data to help really frame our work in addition to the quantitative data. So as we did for quarter 1, again for quarter 2, we conducted a teacher focus group. So this time we really looked at the cycles of professional learning, asking teachers what successes and barriers they were having with the implementation of the cycles of professional learning, specifically for students with disabilities. And we also conducted a survey, which was sent out to special and general education teachers that really looked at how they were implementing and identifying interventions for students, how they were collaborating, and how they were receiving instructional support, along with what their specific identified needs for professional development were. And what we found out is that our initial findings from quarter 1 were confirmed. The information shared around the areas of identified needs were aligned to what we shared in quarter 1 board presentation. So our response to those identified needs with regards to curriculum planning, we are doing professional learning around universal design for learning, differentiation, and specially designed instruction. And we are doing that through offering AU courses in the winter and spring to special and general education teachers. Systemic professional development, again, for general and special education teachers, webinars, and we have differentiated citywide sessions for school leadership. With regards to interventions that were an identified need, we have web-based training modules for teachers. We have identified guidance on how to align intervention to student-specific needs. Also, we provide observation and feedback on implementation and modeling on the implementation of the intervention. For data analysis, we conducted a webinar in February for all educators around looking at the Amplify and the iReady data and how to make instructional decisions for students with disabilities. Around that data, we're providing systemic professional development and IEP chair training and support. So for quarter 1, we shared with the board the heat map data, and this really looked at a cohort of students who are currently in grades 5, 8, and 11. This data was tracked for students across 2 years, so really looking at their growth from 15-16 to school year 17-18 for the iReady assessment. And within this data, we identified students who made no gains, 1 year gain, 2 years of growth, or 3 or more years of growth. So we shared with the board for quarter 1 a plan to follow up on that heat map data. So we have worked to identify schools who are moving students with disabilities 2 or more levels within a 2-year time frame across those grades and within specific grade bands. And we are currently working, as I discussed earlier, with CLN teams to investigate these schools in order to identify teacher practices, school structures, and student supports. So right now, we're in the investigation phase where we're meeting with principals and teachers, observing classrooms and collaborative planning to find out what best practices and structures and student supports are being used to ensure student achievement. And then our plan is to develop a structure to share those best practices across the district. So here is some of the top performing schools for grades 3 to 5 from the heat map data. So you can see for reading, the top schools, we have Montebello, Armistead Gardens, Robert Coleman, Gardenville, Hamilton, and then you can see the top schools also for math. So we've already started to go out to some of these schools, as I said. For grades 6 through 8, the top performing schools for moving students with disabilities 2 or more years. You can see the schools identified for reading as well as identified for math. And then these are the top performing schools for grades 9 through 11 based on the heat map data for reading and for math. So our next steps with regards to planning, continue to offer professional learning community sessions. So this allows general and special education teachers to come together to plan and learn together. Continue to provide literacy webinars, develop planning tools aligned to meet the needs of individual learners, ensure access and training around accessible instructional materials, and alignment of academic monitoring tool and IEP quality monitoring tools to meet MSDE standards. With regards to data analysis, we're going to have data webinars for special education teachers. STAT meetings will continue in order to provide cross-office collaboration. OSE Teaching and Learning and OAA will continue to analyze trend data during STAT to provide strategic professional development, and STAT meetings to review LRE data and plan strategic support to IEP teams.
Continuing with next steps as they are aligned to our 4 buckets of work. Spring AU courses for special and general educators, professional development series for educators and leaders, and when we say educators, all educators to include general and special educators. The 2018 Special Education Summer Institute aligned to instruction and compliance for general and special educators, IEP chairs, and school leaders. And then the March Professional Development, which will offer grade-level standard-based IEP goal writing development for our general and special educators. For our tiered system of support, research-based intervention training modules for all teachers. We will continue to provide guidance on matching interventions for individual student needs. Our educational specialists will provide coaching support to school teams based on data captured from STAT, in alignment and collaboration with our special education liaisons. Also around referral and eligibility, LRE decision-making, and data cleansing. Any questions?
I just have a comment. I just want to thank you for the presentation. I loved the stat video. I love the fact that we are gathering and looking at data and coming up with solutions. I love the fact that that slide about the schools that are moving students, we're identifying them or capturing best practices. I just said this is the kind of presentation like I've been waiting for and been asking for, and so I just really thoroughly appreciate the work, and it looks like we're moving, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brooks. Is there so the professional development for general educators, is it optional?
Right now, it is optional. General education teachers can choose what professional developments they want to attend for systemic PD. I will say, though, that the webinars that we are doing, they are recorded, and so they are then housed on our SharePoint site on 365. So we're encouraging teachers who have not taken the professional development to actually then go back and look at that webinar, or for instructional leadership to use that webinar in collaborative planning sessions with teachers, as well as the SELs and the ACLs to utilize those as well.
So to piggyback off of what Jalima just said, Yes, they are optional. However, we are encouraging through webinars that we're looking at working with teams of teachers, so both general educators as well as special educators and school leaders, but also with an emphasis on our Special Education Institute. We're really encouraging school leaders to encourage teams to come. So we really want to focus on, as we're looking at LRE decision-making and having more of our students receive their specially designed instruction in the general education setting, having our general educators, along with our special educators, IEP chairs, attend these professional development sessions together.
And a subtle point on an earlier slide, the word ongoing. So I've been pushing the team to do more than just systemic professional development, because we know teachers and leaders, they have a lot of decisions to make on those few days during the school year of this versus that. So how do we offer additional offerings for teachers, leaders around professional learning, around specially designed instruction, and so on and so forth?
I just want to add, my commendations to you also. This is probably the first time that I've heard a really comprehensive view of education that includes both people that are providing special education services and the general educators. So thank you so much. It does, if teachers don't get it, I will have to do some more, in terms of helping them, but it's good to hear that we're talking about the whole child. So we are within our blueprint, and it's good to see that in action. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We are moving to procurement, and we have one item on our procurement agenda that was actually reviewed by the Operations Committee. So Digicon, unless you have questions, we're not going to take up. And one has been deferred, so
That was the one I had questions. I didn't know.
the IP aids have been deferred. So we have, if I'm looking at this correctly, 3, correct, that are left.
Correct. We have Inspired Education, Donna Banning, and Baltimore Teachers Union.
Yes. So we'll start with Inspired Instruction. Were there any questions around that one? Anyone?
No, I do not.
No questions, so I think we're
Ms.
over.
Cheney, I'll just make one comment. There was a question from another commissioner, the board chair, regarding the funding source. So it's grant-funded. Title II funds are being allocated for that expense.
Thank you. That one I did pick up, maybe because I've been reading those numbers a lot. Okay. The next one is Donna Banning, consultant, who's working in some of our data areas. Any questions on that one? We don't have questions, so we did our reading. And the third one, the last one, I believe,
Is the BTU.
is the BTU. And this is a part of our contractual?
Correct. It's part of our contract with the teachers union to
Right.
provide these professional development days.
For
we're
paras.
contractually required to provide it.
Yes.
Well, that's the one I had a question on. We're contractually provided, but do we have them attend this conference every year? Is this an annual conference? Do we have options, or do we choose this one, and why? That was my only.
I'm sort of stepping out of my field a little bit.
Yeah.
This is specifically, but I am under the understanding that this is specific for our BTU paraprofessionals.
That we have it in the negotiated agreement. I just didn't know whether we then always send them to the same conference every year, or.
My knowledge and history of it is that BTU offers this conference every year.
And that this
And
is
that
what
they-
we, and we participate.
and
This
we
is how
par-
we meet the terms
yes.
of our agreement. Okay.
So that was an easy one.
That was an
Just want to end with just a special note, because we are, Teaching and Learning Committee is going to be piloting something a little different for the next 2 sessions as a part of our concern and desire to really allow for more public participation and comment. We're going to pilot having our meetings on May the 1st, and that's a date change, and June the 5th, in this same place, but we're going to have those meetings begin at 3:30 p.m., which would allow for folks who, if they'd like to come to make any public comment, to attend. The topic for the May 1st is going to be around operator renewal process, an update on career and technology education, and our mid-performance data, and a special education update. So I'm just saying that now, so if there are folks in the who may want to come and make comment, we're going to provide time at the end of our actual meeting for public comment. And then we're going to try this again on June the 5th. At 3:30 again, we'll be talking about middle and high school choice results. We'll be looking at the charter school compliance report, an update on the blueprint around student wholeness. We will then, at the second June meeting, the committee will then review, see what has happened with this pilot, and make some determinations as we make our schedule for next year as to whether we will do a combination of early morning and afternoon meetings. But we're going to try this and see. We do encourage people, if you'd like to come and to be here live, to please come and join us May 1st, June 5th, 3:30 here in the boardroom. There are no other comments from the committee. Thank you very much, and this session is now closed.